Honestly, if you bought one of these brand new, you might want to skip ahead a little bit because this is going to hurt.
These are basically fairly robust and not known for having catastrophic engine failures quite spontaneously, but they still do have plenty of problems.
This inspires you to drive one-handed, leaning in, stroking your chin, thinking about corporate restructuring and hostile takeovers. Okay, just because these look like absolute bargains now, doesn't necessarily mean you should buy one. We're going to show you what goes wrong with them, what they're like to drive and live with, how they're aging, and we're going to answer the big question, if you should buy one or not. But before we get to all of that, you really do need to know the basics. The third generation or D4 A8 is available locally in long or short wheelbases and with petrol or diesel engines, although the majority on the used market will be diesels, like this one. All feature quattro all-wheel drive and an 8-speed automatic transmission. However, if you prefer more spice when it comes to your large luxury sedan appetite, may I suggest this generation's S8. They're packing the same bi-turbo 4-litre V8 that you'll find propelling the Bentley Continental GT, not to mention the full supporting cast of performance Go Fast bits. As expected, the D4 generation can be split into various iterations with a subtle revision in 2013 and a full facelift and update in 2014. Now in Australia, what's under the bonnet generally signifies the trim spec, although that can vary, it's the flagship Audi, things change, not to mention the range of optional extras that were available on these is immense. Not to mention, this just covers our local models. Internationally, there are well over a dozen engine options and trim specs. The possible configurations are seemingly endless. However, the one thing that all A8s do have in common are the crazy levels of depreciation. Honestly, if you bought one of these brand new, you might want to skip ahead a little bit because this is going to hurt. Currently here in Australia on the used market, these are swapping hands from anywhere from about $20,000 to $50,000. But it's important to remember, a 2014 3.0 TDI was retailing here for about $210,000. That same car right now, they're swapping hands for about $40,000. That's a loss in depreciation of about $17,000 a year. Even worse, a 2014 S8, they've lost around $25,000 of value per year. Imagine buying a car for $280,000 and then 10 years later, it's dropped $220,000 in value. That is insane. But you know what? The same goes for some of this car's competition. BMW 740 Li, $235,000 new. These days, all yours for around about $30,000. A Mercedes-Benz S-Class, like the one we featured years ago, $230,000 brand new, now potentially $35,000. However, there are potentially two ways that you can look at this. Either a horrendous financial decision when you bought one brand new, or maybe an absolute bargain if you're buying one used. But regardless of if you're buying new or used or an import or even a classic, the one smart financial decision that you can make is hitting that driver link down there. Driver exists to get you the very best finance package from loads of different lenders. The entire process is so easy, so simple and fast, plus there are no hidden fees and it's totally free. Now when it comes to the looks and exterior stuff, personally, I love these things for two specific reasons. Number one, I feel like compared to the S-Class and the 7 Series, this has always been quite the underdog, yet it still nails the cool, sophisticated, huge luxury sedan thing. And number two, Robert De Niro. Now, I don't know if you're a movie buff or not, but there's a movie called Ronin with Robert De Niro, and the A8 features in it, and I guarantee if you watch that movie, you can't not be an A8 fan after watching it. In saying that, it's a whole different generation A8 to this, and De Niro doesn't even drive the car in the movie, but you get the point. And yes, I know it's an S8 in the movie, not an A8, you get the point. Common complaints and issues with the exterior, plenty of owners have complained about water leaking into the cabin from the sunroof area. Now this would normally suggest that maybe the drain holes around the sunroof are blocked and water's getting in that way, but with this it might actually be a little hole that forms between the top of the windscreen and the body of the car. Now the dodgy fix for this can be just squirting some silicone in there that can sort of stop it, but if you want to do it properly, you've got to replace the whole windscreen. Now the issue with that is if you want to save some money and use not a genuine OEM Audi windscreen, that can play havoc with the sensors and the cameras and all that sort of stuff, so you can't really use an aftermarket windscreen. But then if you do pay top dollar for a genuine Audi OEM windscreen, well, the cameras and sensors have to be recalibrated anyway. And yeah, you guessed it, that's going to be expensive. Now, just back to the sunroof, this isn't just with the A8, this is all cars, but especially Audis and Volkswagens. You've got to make sure that the drainage holes have been cleared. If water builds up in there, it'll find its way inside the interior, sometimes in behind the dash, and it just plays havoc with all of the electronics. Being an A8, it is loaded to the brim with electronics. Actually, just on potential electronic issues, apparently the motors for the powered boot can fail. The adaptive headlights can have some issues. The power windows and mirrors can play up. Basically, if it has electricity running to it, it has a reported issue attached to it, and that means pretty much the entire exterior of the car. Aside from the electronics, quite a few owners complain that there can be some condensation build up in the taillights. Also, and this goes for plenty of cars, the sensor that detects your foot for the automatic boot opening, it works sporadically at best, so it looks like you end up trying to do river dance the whole time when you're in the car park. Now look, obviously not every single A8 out there are going to have this sort of problems. There's thousands of them out there, just like Nick that owns this car, that have never ever had a problem. However, when you read through the owners groups and forums, it seems that for every 2 or 3 owners that have never had an issue, there's at least one that have had all of the issues, and they would just rather the A8 be out of their lives. And obviously a massive thank you to Nick and all of the members of the owners groups and forums that helped provide the information that we're now telling you. Okay, now common faults and complaints inside. Let's start with the MMI screen. Sometimes it can successfully rise out of the dash, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it struggles to get out of the dash, a bit like a retired rugby league player getting out of bed in the morning. Next up, the camera up here. The solder joints, they can fall apart. Apparently it's due to temperature. The issue is plenty of owners have complained that Audi don't have parts, so you're left with having to get used parts, but even then you've got to get it coated and calibrated. That won't be cheap. Plenty of owners have had issues with the electronic parking brake staying on due to a wiring issue. This actually means having to get the car towed away to get repaired because it won't move if that's locked on. And then, like the exterior, anything with electricity to it has an owner or 5 complaining that it stopped working. Powered seat adjusters playing up, infotainment glitches, all the tech just being slow to respond, buttons not working, the sunroof failing to open, or worse, not close. This might take you about half an hour to do, but if you are in the market buying one of these, make sure you press every button, try every function, just make sure it all works. Also, if the infotainment system is doing weird things, it might just require a software update. This generally fixes a bunch of issues. Then you've got the non-electronic complaints. Owners have complained that the piano black plastic just scratches really easily. I've said this so many times, manufacturers stop it with piano black plastic. Yes, it looks fantastic when it's new, but it's bloody horrible for wear and tear. Actually, just on the wear and tear in this particular car, Nick that owns this has kids, so there's kids in here all the time. It's done nearly 210,000 Ks. The wear and tear is spectacular. I know owners have complained about the piano black plastic getting scratched up. Not in this. It looks fantastic. Even the gloss, okay, there's a few tiny little scratches on the wood grain around here, but not too bad. The leather on the driver's seat is starting to gather a little bit, but elsewhere, this is phenomenal. The leather's still soft, there's still good texture, just great for wear and tear. Actually, Mercedes-Benz fans are gonna hate me saying this. This is aging so much better than the S-Class that we shot ages ago, and this has got more Ks on it. If you wanna see that video, link is down there. And elsewhere in here, it is utterly beautiful, beautiful to look at. It even smells nice. Everything you touch just feels so premium. Even the buttons, everything, it's just such a great place to be. Actually, even just getting into this, you don't just get in like you do in an SUV. You sink into this bath of sophistication and class and just comfort. Actually, just on the comfort thing, these seats, so comfortable, and the massage function is. Now, when it comes to actually using this interior, I still think BMW's iDrive has the edge for how intuitive an infotainment system is to use. This isn't bad by any means, but it is starting to feel its age a little bit. It does help that I'm left-handed in a right-hand drive market though. While we're on the subject of infotainment systems, these never came with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto as standard, but it's easily fixed with third-party and aftermarket items. Also, if you're in the market, try to find one with the optional Bang & Olufsen 19-speaker sound system. Honestly, it is one of the best car sound systems I've ever heard. It sounds like being in a recording studio. Now, as far as what other features and tech you get, look, if I was to explain it all, we'd be here for bloody days. Instead, we're gonna put a graphic on the screen. You ready to hit pause? Hit pause now. Obviously, the S8 models, they get even more bits and bobs, and as I alluded to before, the list of optional extras makes Lord of the Rings seem like a short story. Basically, if you want to function in these cars, it will probably have it. Just investigate the example you're looking at. But even though it's got heaps of stuff, this still does need to be a functioning car. Is it practical? Here we go. Got a little net down here. Excellent sized glove box with different levels and shelves. Got a split center console. This also slides back and forth as well, like that, and storage under here. I think these are cup holders, but it doesn't work at the moment. and I don't want to force it because it's not my car. I don't want to break that. Good sized door bins, a little hidden storage spot under here, and a spot for your sunglasses up there. I think that's it. Nothing there, nothing under there. Yeah, not too bad for practicality. Now, on the subject of movies that feature an Audi A8, I'm exactly 10 centimeters taller than star of 3 of the 4 Transporter movies, Jason Statham. This is my driving position, and oh my God, what a backseat area. Not only is there loads of room, heaps of knee room, heaps of foot room, the seats are so comfortable, and it's just a nice place to be back here. Even as far as wear and tear goes, remember, this car is used on a daily basis. There are kids back here all the time. Okay, leather's getting a little bit wrinkly, but besides that, like, this is a soft Alcantara kind of thing. That's looking fantastic. Oh, one more thing on the seating. Wouldn't want to sit in the middle. The transmission tunnel is massive, so that would be uncomfortable. Besides that, this is, again, like the front, just a beautiful place to be. As far as tech and features go in the backseat, here we go. Unfortunately, I'm going to start with negatives. There are 2 cigarette lighters for the ashtrays here. Smoking is just disgusting, but it is an executive saloon from Germany. I kind of get it. You've got your own air vents, you've got sort of airline style map pockets back here, good sized door bins, but then pull this down and you've got your own climate controls here. You've got storage under here. Then in here, you've got another little hidden cubby hole. You can probably put a fridge back there as an option. This is fantastic. Hang on, cup holders. Oh yeah, no, cup holders. Look at that. How cool is that? As far as practicality in the boot goes, yeah, obviously it's massive back here. All of these cars are. But yeah, an SUV is going to be more practical. Now, as far as the safety features go, just like all of the other tech and features, there are way too many to list out individually. But to try to make this part both entertaining and informative, we're going to have my German mate do it as fast as he possibly can for you.
Sie können mindestens 8 Airbags, Antiblockiersystem, Traktions- und elektronische Stabilitätskontrolle, Parksensoren vorn und hinten und eine Rückfahrkamera sowie Audi-Späßbrint-Technologie und Isofix-Befestigungspunkte erwarten. Höherwertige und spätere Modelle können jedoch eine adaptive Geschwindigkeitsregelung, Audis Präsense Plus System mit Spurhaltetechnologie und eine Reihe weiterer Funktionen enthalten. Es ist sicher, glauben Sie mir, ich bin Deutscher.
Now look, don't worry about trying to remember all the what goes wrong stuff or all the features. We have everything listed on the free A8 cheat sheet. Plus, you can get a history report done there as well, and that is critical if you're buying any car. That history report will show you if the car has been stolen, written off, or if there's any money owing on it. Honestly, it's critical you get one done before you buy any car. Are you tired of streaky, squeaky wipers? Confused by wipers that are hard to buy and even harder to fit? Sick of paying extortionate prices for wipers? Well, introducing WiperTech. Purchase wipers from the leisure of your home and have them delivered straight to your door. Not only are they a piece of cake to fit, they fit perfectly, and you can now enjoy streak and squeak-free wipering all day. Plus, use our code and get 15% off your purchase. Okay, common complaints when it comes to the driving experience. Some owners of pre-facelift cars, if they're wearing 20s, have complained of excessive road noise. Really? Compared to what? Silence? This is a pre-facelift car. It's wearing 20s. It's pretty much silent in here. If you're complaining about that, stop being so sensitive. Also, a few motoring journalists have complained that the ride isn't quite as plush as an S-Class, and if you really start pushing it through the corners, it does fall into understeer. Okay, in S-Class it might waft along more than this, but I think this is a more dynamic drive, arguably a more enjoyable car to actually drive. And secondly, understeer? Sorry, you know this is an A8, right? That's like complaining that a fork is terrible to eat soup with. I mean, surely no one is ever driving an A8 hard enough to induce understeer. That's just stupid. But besides that, seriously, what an epic thing, especially this engine. Put that foot down and like, my God, it's honestly, it feels like you're taking off in an A380. As I just mentioned, it's totally silent in here. There are no rattles whatsoever. You're totally isolated from everything going on out there. Although it is a really big car and it certainly feels it, especially when you're trying to park it or if you're negotiating tight spaces. And look, I know you're supposed to drive with 2 hands on the wheel, but this inspires you to drive one-handed, leaning in, stroking your chin, thinking about corporate restructuring and hostile takeovers. Very few other cars out there can nail this perfect balance between total confidence and control, yet totally refined and just luxurious. But you know what? It would be even more impressive if nothing ever went wrong mechanically. However, unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, I can't elaborate on this, but you know who can? It's our resident qualified mechanic, Jim.
Before we get started, I just want to apologise about the audio. It's actually pissing down outside. I'm going to start with the V6 TDI. Look, one of the problems these have is inside the valley of these things, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. There's manifold actuators, there's EGR coolers, there are oil filter housings, the turbo sits right above it. There's a lot of plastic fittings and it's very much affected by heat. Now, there's a lot of sources of oil leaks in there and coolant leaks. And when it comes time to repair it, you pull the thing apart and you'll find every seal and every O-ring is just leaking. It can be expensive to fix. One of those parts in there is the EGR cooler. Now they can actually leak internally as well as externally. And when they do, that leaks into the exhaust. Now, quite often that can be misdiagnosed as a head gasket issue. So just if you're losing coolant and you can't find where, make sure that is checked. That EGR, well, the EGR valve adjacent to that, that causes issues as well. It just basically clogs up with carbon and crap and basically just chokes itself to death. And that clogging can get so bad that the inlet manifold actuators, they just get completely seized and they can be, quite expensive to fix too. Occasionally they have high pressure fuel complications, not very common though. But what is common, very common, is injector seal leaking. By design, Audi actually put a nice little hole in the side of the head so you can hear it leak when it's bad enough and it just spews carbon and crap out there. It's a pretty common problem, something to look out for. Now the 4.2 litre diesel, the V8, it's very different to the V6. It's actually more like two litre 4 cylinders side by side. One of the features of them is they have 2 ECUs, they have 2 MAP sensors, they have 2 MAF sensors, they have 2 crank angle sensors, and that can actually make them a bit of a pain in the ass to diagnose. In that regard, the V6 is much simpler. But overall, the engine is pretty stout, but they do have a few issues. The harmonic balancer can play up. They do have all the usual EGR and EGR cooler complications, and they also have injector issues too. They are known for leaking oil, and higher mileage ones, especially if they've been neglected, have oil consumption problems. Another issue you'll see is engine mounts. They're really soft to absorb all that, all the diesel vibrations, but they're so soft and they just fail often and they're very expensive to fix. Now the 4 litre twin turbo V8 petrol, look, pretty good engine overall. One of the issues you are likely to see is the PCV or the air oil separator. It leaks internally and causes a vacuum leak, and when that does, you'll get a whole bunch of lean air-fuel ratio fault codes. The cooling system on these is very complex. They have their problems with water pumps and thermostat housings. Basically, the cooling system is probably the Achilles heel here. There's a lot of fittings, a lot of the plastic fittings break over time, and you'll just get a lot of leaks. But one of the biggest and most expensive problems on these is turbo failure. What happens there is the oil supply lines, they basically block up. There's oil strainers or filters in there, which just clog up with carbon and crap, and then the turbo has oil starvation problems, and then the turbo fails. It's not a bad idea to, as a preventative measure, replace the lines and the screens as well, because that will be a lot cheaper than new turbos. And again, in these, the engine mounts are really soft and pretty expensive. Now the 4.2 litre V8 petrol, look, it's a lot simpler than the twin turbo, but it still has a few problems. Oil leaks are a big issue with these things, valve covers, timing covers, and basically front and rear seals, and that can be made much worse if you have any engine breather or PCV complications, which they are prone to have. Now the timing chains on these, I wouldn't say it's a common problem, but the guides can fail and the chains can fail as well. Now they are at the back of the engine. When it fails, it typically does cause a catastrophic engine failure. Not super common though. Now I should mention that all of these engines have the timing chains at the back of the engine. And while they, like I said, they're not a huge common problem, they can break, or the guides can fail and they can make a terrible rattling sound. And that is much worse on neglected or higher mileage models. Trouble is here is when they become problematic, the whole engine and transmission needs to come out of the car, which is the case for a lot of stuff these days, but it's really expensive. It's very time consuming and labor intensive, so it can be eye-wateringly expensive. Especially the V8 models. Look, the V8s in these are amongst probably some of the most complicated domestic engines you can get these days. So if anything should go wrong, it's always going to be very expensive. Now the transmission in these is the ZF 8HP, which actually is not made by Audi and is incredibly reliable. Yeah, funny that. Now, a bit of a caution here, and this mainly applies to the S8s. They're somewhat affordable and highly tunable. So a lot of people are doing that, and you just have to be super careful. If it's been tuned, you are very much more likely to have issues with it. safe bet, just get one that just has not been molested. And of course, lastly, as Adam alluded to, the electronics in these, they all share a whole bunch of complicated electronic systems, which is usually somewhat problematic. So prepare yourself for that.
Now, there's another thing we need to talk about here. It's who owned the A8 before you. For an A8 not to be a huge reliability and therefore financial risk, it is critical that these scheduled services are thoroughly adhered to. Unfortunately, a lot of A8 owners leased the vehicles originally and they didn't adhere to the scheduled servicing. That's because they treat the cars like they're a disposable item and they just don't care how they're going to age in the long run. Plus remember, the depreciation on used examples, it's not going to stop. Previous generation A8s are asking as little as $9,000. These will eventually do the same. One owner that we spoke to nailed it when it comes to buying a used A8. He's had about 5 of them for his business and he's loved them all. That is until they hit about 150,000 Ks. That's when they can become a nightmare of horrendously expensive repairs, and it's really hard to justify spending thousands of dollars on a car that is constantly losing thousands of dollars in value. Look, we don't doubt there are thousands of examples out there that will rack up hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kilometers without skipping a beat. But do you have the immense financial and emotional resilience required to take the risk? Especially when you can have another car that ticks plenty of these boxes while also avoiding many of the pitfalls. This one. But a question for you, if you weren't to buy this or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know down there. Talk to you next time. Flagship model Audi, that can vary in itself. Plus there's this immense range of optional extras. Slow down.